Hi, dear listener. Welcome to the Young Changemakers Podcast, an initiative from Global Changemakers. Your co-hosts, Sophie, George, and William, are very happy to have you join us today. Over this first season, we'll show you the incredible impact of youth and hopefully inspire you to take action too. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're ready, let's go!
Okay, hello listeners, and welcome to the very first episode of Young Changemakers. I'm pretty excited to be here today, introducing you to myself and some co-hosts of mine, Willie and Sophie, who will be also hosting the episode with me. So yeah, my name's George. I'm from Australia, 24 years old. Personally, my interest is in agriculture, and more specifically how agriculture can change to become more sustainable, but also be used in a way to address bigger issues such as access to food, nutrition security, as well as helping to mitigate climate change. That's just something I'm a bit more interested in, and I'll be talking more about throughout the program. Moving forward, I'd like to introduce the co-host of mine, Sophie from Switzerland.
Hello.
So Sophie, if you could just introduce yourself a bit and then maybe tell the listeners a bit more about what the podcast will be about. So welcome, Sophie.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. So my name is Sophie. I'm from Switzerland. I'm 25, and so I think I'm the oldest one on the team. I'm the grandma of the team. And so I've, for the past couple of years, have been working for different NGOs in different fields. But I would say my biggest passion is youth leadership development and youth empowerment. This is why I've been in the Global Changemakers Network for the past almost 2.5 years, and met George and Willie this year when I came back to the Global Youth Summit. And so what else do I do? I'm currently actually a master's student in development studies in the UK. And I'm just really, really excited to start this initiative with my wonderful co-hosts. And maybe now you're asking yourself, what is this podcast going to be about? So George already mentioned a bit the backstory, as in what the organization Global Changemakers does, and the goal of it, and why we're creating this podcast now is that within the network we saw that there are a lot of really great individuals, with very inspiring stories, and we heard those stories mostly through actually meeting them and talking to them. And we felt like it would be even greater if more people could hear those stories, and also perhaps even get inspired by these individuals. And so we decided to create this podcast to have a chat with these individuals and basically get to know their story, a bit their passion, their ambition, but also sort of the lessons they learned along the way. And again, hopefully inspire a bit more of you guys out there to create a positive impact in your community. So I hope I summarize it well enough. And I'd like to introduce you to our third host here, William.
Hey guys.
From Guatemala. And
Yeah.
Willie, can you talk or tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi guys, my name is William. I come from Guatemala, as Sophie said. And this year I assisted to the Global Youth Summit in Switzerland, which was an incredible, amazing experience, and which I had the opportunity to meet people from all over the world, and also people which we are starting, like new initiatives like this to spread the word of people doing change and positive impact in their communities. So I study chemical engineering, and for the last 4 years, I've been involved in like grassroots initiatives, and like mostly that support this the reduction of inequalities in the surroundings of the city of Guatemala. So we've been like supporting the nursing homes and orphanages in the way of creating like um, fundraising stuff or recreational activities to them, because most of these organizations here are like government funded and they don't receive that much support, so they need a lot of volunteers. So now I'm gonna ask George, what are listeners going to get out of this podcast?
Thanks, Willie. And I think you forgot to mention in there a bit about yourself, like you've got an amazing voice on you, mate. Like I remember that we had an open mic night on, I think it was the middle of the week during the summit, and a few keen performers got up and did a bit of a performance. And I remember Willie's was, you sang to a traditional Guatemalan song. Loved it.
Thanks, man.
And you have to flick me through a bit of your music preferences, because
that's cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Okay. Yeah, so I think ultimately, if you're listening to this podcast, it provides just a great opportunity to hear from people from all walks of life and what motivated them personally to want to do either their own project or become a part of another organization or NGO, or whether that's climate activism or youth-led empowerment, sustainable agriculture. It's going to help you understand a bit more how to get involved in that side of work in terms of social impact and empowering communities around you. Personally, like when I attended the summit, by talking to people and hearing their stories, definitely opens up other perspectives. The more you talk to people from different walks of life, the better understanding you get of their various topics, and it makes you realize that not always your own opinion isn't the best in that aspect. So yeah, I think that's one of the ways, one thing that listeners are going to get out of the podcast. Also, it's just an opportunity to enjoy different stories from different countries. You can tune in from anywhere. And yeah, so I'm going to move on to Willie's going to talk a bit more about what you're most excited to start on this adventure.
Yeah.
Can I cut in really quickly? Just because I thought that was great what you said, George, about sort of getting your views challenged. I think that's something that is definitely a big goal that we have from, not only actually for you guys listeners, but for ourselves to get our, as hosts, to get our views challenged and to, sort of challenge our own status quo. And I think it's something that, when you start listening to our episodes, be open-minded. There's so many ways to view the world and ways to look at challenges and do be open-minded, because there's a lot to learn.
Definitely, yeah.
I agree.
I guess we're entering interesting times, aren't we? And if we're looking at solving some of these issues, they're so interconnected. What we're doing in our backyard in Australia in terms of the climate change, it has impact in other countries. Some politicians like to think that it doesn't because we're such a small country, but, we need to, as individuals, lead the change that, stand up and realize that we actually need to do something positive. And then hopefully that, in a sense, will create a movement around people around us. And that's the powerful thing about the Changemakers Network, is that everyone gets behind each other. And no matter what project you're doing, you have an amazing network for others to support, which is why I'm so stoked to be talking and sharing such good stories.
Absolutely. So sorry, I sort of interrupted, but so yeah, Willie, what are you most excited about in this new adventure?
I'm really excited about many things, guys. Like, for example, that we're going to add value to a lot of people through this podcast, especially because we're about to share inspiring stories, right? From people that come from very, very different backgrounds and countries and even continents, right? So that's a very, very interesting characteristic about this podcast, because probably podcasts struggle with growing their audience, like going to other countries, but we're going to have that opportunity to interview people from all over the world. And as I told you, even people that probably might not be interested in social impact will get inspired by all these stories, and they will get along with this movement. Definitely,
yeah. I think there's going to be some interesting conversations with people doing such incredible work. Personally, I've got a list of interviewees who I'm going to be talking to, and I know from their backgrounds, having met some of them, that the conversation is going to be great. From addressing food insecurity in Kenya to climate activism, supporting refugees, some interesting topics. And yeah, I think you're going to enjoy the podcast very much. Okay, so Sophie, I'd just like to take it to you, and could you explain to the listeners, first of all, what are the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, and why you think they're needed, and how they're related to the core work of global change makers?
So yeah, sure. So the Sustainable Development Goals, they're also called SDGs, or they're also known under the Agenda 2030. So they're basically goals that were written by the UN and the countries within the UN, and they're a framework towards which, or that we are trying to attain until 2030. So they go from, gender equality to quality education to life on land, life in the water. They range around, let's say, or they tackle a lot of basically global issues, right? And what's great about them, or why they're needed, is that first of all, they were decided by a whole bunch of countries, right? I think the UN has 193 members currently, something along those lines. So basically the whole world came together and decided, okay, what is important? Where do we want to see our world in 15 years? Because they were written in 2015. And so that's one thing that I think is really valuable about these goals, is that they're really global, and they were done in a very participatory way. And that's one of the really good things about it. And it also doesn't matter if you have yourself a big or a small project. Every sort of socially responsible project can help any of these goals, or several of these goals. And so this is why I personally am a big fan of them. I've been working with them since they were created. And we're actually gonna try to bring interviewees from all the different, we're working to cover all of these goals. So that's why we quickly wanted to mention them on our introductory episode right now.
Hi there. We hope you're enjoying this episode so far. We just wanted to let you know that we are on social media at WeAreGCM. And don't hesitate to follow us. And if you'd like to support us further, we also have a Patreon page. Type in Global Changemakers and decide which tier is best for you. Thank you. And now, on with the rest of the episode.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so for sharing such amazing information with our audience. And now I got a question for you, George. What kind of social impact will be discussed in the podcast?
So thanks, Willie. Some of the social impact that I'll be discussing in this podcast series, it'll vary quite a lot. So we've proposed to do about 13 or so episodes with different interviewees, ranging from guests from South Africa. This is just going off a list: Argentina, Ghana, Brazil, Kenya, Indonesia, Malawi. So quite a variety of countries represented there. And some of the social impact work they're doing, I mean, a lot of everyone's work is aimed at having a human sort of social related positive impact, whether that be through climate activism. Ultimately, we know that climate change is going to affect pretty much everyone, but as well as there'll be social impact projects around, as I mentioned before, food security in Kenya, as well as some change makers are doing sort of gender equality projects, women empowerment, which we all know is critical for poverty alleviation. And then they'll branch out to things more about affordable and clean energy, which is all different areas of activism associated with the SDGs, which Sophie alluded to earlier. So a variety of topics, and it'll keep everything interesting, and I'm sure our listeners can learn a lot more about different subjects that they previously haven't been exposed to. So we're going to move on. I'm going to ask you a question, Willie. How did your participation at the Global Youth Summit enhance your skills personally and perspective on your work in your relevant fields? Can you elaborate a bit more on your own circumstance?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, George. So as I just mentioned before, as the summit brings together many people from different backgrounds in many countries all around the world, that are working, these people is working on, different issues such as climate change, human rights, the reduction of inequalities, peace, mental health. And it's really cool because you get a wide overview of how the world's situation is, right? And I think we all learned it a lot. And again, as I said it before, I want to thank again the GCM team because they worked so hard to make that week very, very special, and also for us to learn a lot of things. And also, there was a time in which we got the opportunity to be with expert speakers and this skills marketplace. I remember it was very interesting listening to all this talks and getting to know many perspectives as we were participating in all these talks, and also working with a group throughout the week. It helped me also to enhance my teamwork skills, as well as to learn more about this design thinking method to launch, initiatives or campaigns in order to create social impact. And also it was really cool because there were these unconferences, right? Where you would get the opportunity to listen to the GCMers about their different works. And that was really cool also. So in summary, I would say that we all learned it a lot. And we also did networking, and it was so cool. So yeah, that was my summary of what I learned at the GYS Summit.
By the way, if we used a few acronyms such as GCM or GYS, GCM is Global Changemakers, and GYS is the Global Youth Summit, which is the summit that we mentioned and where we all had the chance to meet in person. Just in case. I feel like in a lot of NGOs and networks, there are a lot of acronyms. I don't know if you've had this when a few of your friends are in like the same organization and they're talking with all their acronyms, and at some point you're like, wait, what is this? You know,
Yeah.
whatever XYZ thing. So excuse us for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add on to what Willie said. What was so, like I mentioned before, I've been involved a bit in the network for the past 2 years. So I was a participant like Willie and George this year, but 2 years ago. And this year I had the chance to return as what is called a peer facilitator. So basically a facilitator. And so to sort of see the other side, like the organizational side of the summit was really great. It was also great to facilitate spaces for the participants. I think it was a very valuable lesson for me personally. And that's so great about this organization, is that there is a lot of confidence or trust put into youth. And also basically it's a space given to youth to, try things out and learn. And I think that's something I really, really appreciate from the organization and from the network. And I'm glad we can continue in a way, a bit different from the summit, but in a way continue giving this space to young people through our podcast. So very, very excited to work with you two on this. And hopefully you guys like it too.
So I'll cut in. I think just because we want to get the listeners to understand a bit more about ourselves, I think it's a good time now to, Sophie, if you don't mind sharing a bit more about your personal story and what, as you've mentioned previously, got you involved for the last couple of years. So you've been an active member in youth leadership and development field, and you work for several NGOs. Do you mind explaining a bit more about why you find youth to be so vital for the change that you think is necessary for them to drive?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, youth development and empowerment has always been something that I've enjoyed, and the past couple of years have actively sort of worked for or towards. And so I did that first through an organization called ISEC, and it's possible that quite a few of you guys out there know about it or have been involved in it. And they work in youth leadership development. And that's how I actually then got into the Global Changemakers Network 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And it's funny, like when people used to ask me this question, why is youth so important, or youth empowerment or so important? I used to say that because youth is the future. And the past couple of months, I've changed my answer to youth is the now, in a way, because I feel like the work of youth is very, very valuable. Like you'll be listening to these stories in the next couple of months on our podcast, but there's so much value in the work that young people do. And unfortunately right now, structures and cultures around the world don't really give a space and don't give as much value to the voices and the work that young people do. And this is something that I'd like to change. And this is why I'm focusing on youth, just because what we do and what we think, what we say is just as valuable as anybody with 10, 15, 50 years experience. And so that would be my answer. That, you know, youth is now, and the impact that youth has is extremely valuable. And I'd like to promote it more.
Yeah, I think we all agree with what you said. So thank you for sharing with us your experience. And guys, as you may have heard, like George studied agribusiness in Australia, and he worked in, you know, regenerative agriculture and sustainable food systems. And we all think that when you work in this kind of topics or any other topics that are like, you know, adding value to something more sustainable, you become like really passionate, right? So George, my question to you is, what role do you think agriculture plays in our current society? And like, what role do you hope it will take on in the future?
Yeah, thanks, Willie. Look, that's a question I ask myself every day, I think. Like, I mean, my journey in agriculture started out to be a traditional one. You know, most people are born on a farm, follow what their parents do, and that's about it. You life on the land is what you know and what you keep on knowing. But for me, I guess I had what some people call like a paradigm shift. I studied agribusiness and I thought I was on a, you know, just a safe path, going to graduate from my undergrad and get a job and happy days. But I was lucky to go over to South Africa, and I met a very interesting farmer there who was a bit of a mentor for me. And he introduced to me that agriculture is not just a sort of a production commodity driven type of process, and that the way we farm can be used to actually add value back to all sorts of things. First of all, add value back into the soil, our landscape, which in turn will create better food, which people are eating. If we have better food, we have healthier societies. So yeah, in answering your question, agriculture plays a detrimental and significant part in society at the moment. And I'm pretty excited for where I'm at the moment to be I'm studying a master's in sustainable agriculture and food security in the UK. And my perspective from agriculture is that it has huge potential to not only increase food production, but to do it in a way that can sequester carbon back into the soils. And without getting too sciencey, yeah, agriculture has huge potential to contribute to the fight against climate change. So I'm sure I'll be sharing more about that later in the project.
Cool. It's really cool, man.
Yeah.
So last but not least, Willie, about your background. So you created back in Guatemala sorry, I'm saying this in a completely English accent, Yo por ti.
Yeah, that's...
All the Spanish speakers do not mock me on my accent.
It's a very good one, actually.
Thank you very much. And so your organization works, or the work of the organization has focused on reducing inequalities, and it's targeted mostly human rights for the elderly and for children in need. So can you share with the listeners, you know, what motivated you personally to get into that field and create such an initiative?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. So you know, Yo por ti just like came up with a friend because we noticed that there was a lack of interest in volunteering in our university, and especially in our faculty, which is engineering. Like most students tend to be introverted and they don't care about many other things besides their studies. So we really decided to, you know, just create this organization to gather people to volunteer in, you know, like nursery homes or just orphanages. That was the idea at the beginning. But like later down the road, we got to get a group of friends that really were committed to this volunteer program. So we were, like doing the gathering of groceries. We started doing some fundraisings in benefit for the others, for the nursing homes, and also for the orphanages. And I think that we always, Guatemalans, we really notice it that all of these places need a lot of volunteers because of the lack of people working in those places. So that's something we have really noticed it. And the good thing here is that there are a lot of organizations really willing to, help these advantageous places. So we are really happy because we have seen a growth in interest in getting involved in these volunteer initiatives that are not that big, because this is only an organization we just created with a friend, and it's in the university. But a year ago, we helped a bit to the shelters that were being built to these people that were like harmed because of the eruption of Volcán de Fuego. And so we've been more in touch with these communities now. We've been like giving them a lot of like food and also clothes and stuff they need. And we're very happy because next year we're launching a workshop about bandages that will help them know how to react in any case if there is anyone like suffering from a growth bone or something like that. So we're very, very happy because we're about to impact like 200 people with this workshop. So we're working very hard to carry out that project for the next year. So yeah, that's my background. And yeah, thank you guys.
We can actually link all of our LinkedIns in the show notes.
Yeah,
if
that
you're
would be nice.
Interested to connect, please feel free.
Yeah, we're all excited for the next few months and sharing some of the stories from these interviewees. So that's pretty much the wrap on the first episode. And I don't know if you guys want to add anything else.
We're very, very, very excited to have you all, share this adventure with us.
Yeah, guys, thank you for listening to this very first episode.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Kwaheri.
If you'd like to know more about Global Changemakers and our mission of enabling youth to create a positive impact in their communities, you can visit our website at global-changemakers.net or follow us on social media at WeAreGCM. And if you'd like to support us further, go check out our Patreon page at Global Changemakers and help us have a greater impact. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Young Changemakers. See you next Tuesday.